The series starts with a man named Park Chung-ho, who has prepared a special dinner for his wife to celebrate their wedding anniversary at a fancy restaurant. However, instead of being happy, his wife Miho looks annoyed because she thinks he has wasted money on something unimportant. Miho reminds her husband that they need to pay their debt and interest, which is almost 300 million won. Chung-ho asks her to appreciate his effort to make her and his father-in-law happy. His father-in-law, Gi-kwang, seems very pleased, and Miho's attitude towards her husband softens. Shortly after, Chung-ho receives a call from a prosecutor investigating a murder case at Gucheon University Hospital. After the call, Chung-ho leaves the restaurant to meet the prosecutor. As he leaves, a waitress gives him a glass of iced coffee to take with him. While driving, he drinks the coffee but soon feels dizzy and loses control of his car, resulting in an accident. The scene then shifts to 7 days earlier. Chung-ho, who works as a lawyer, is nicknamed Big Mouth by his colleagues because he often speaks before thinking, leading him to lose every trial. Although he has a respected job, he is still a third-rate lawyer with many debts. He and his wife still live with his father-in-law and often argue about their financial troubles. That morning, before going to court, Miho reminds her husband about their debt and urges him to win the case. Surprisingly, Chung-ho has bribed a judge to ensure a win. Even more surprising is that his father-in-law supports this action. When the trial starts, Chung-ho is shocked to see that the judge has been replaced, and the one he bribed is now handling another case. Because of this, he loses the trial and gets attacked by his clients who had paid him. After the incident, Chung-ho talks with his father-in-law to find a solution to his problem. He had borrowed a lot of money to bribe the judge and now has to face his wife's anger because he lost in court again. Soon after, he gets a call from Miho, who is furious about his loss. He apologizes and promises to work harder to win next time. Chung-ho then tells Miho that he wants to become a divorce lawyer. This makes her very angry, and she threatens to file for divorce. Surprisingly, he agrees to the divorce but asks to stay in her father's house even after they separate. That evening, Chung-ho is too scared to go home and asks Gi-kwang to bring him some clothes to stay at the office for a while. Shortly after, he gets a call from Choi Do-ha, the mayor of Gucheon, who wants to hire him for a criminal case. Do-ha asks Chung-ho to meet him at a remote and empty location. When they meet, Do-ha reveals that he knows about Chung-ho's financial problems. Do-ha wants to hire him for the murder case of Professor So, a doctor at Gucheon University Hospital. The police have named 3 high-ranking officials at the hospital as suspects. Do-ha chose Chung-ho because the 3 suspects want an incompetent and obedient lawyer to follow their plans in court. Chung-ho initially refuses the offer because he doesn't want to be controlled. However, Do-ha convinces him to accept by revealing his plan to frame the 3 officials because they interfered in government affairs after funding his mayoral campaign. Afterward, Do-ha tells Chung-ho about the missing car dashboard camera footage, which is crucial evidence for the murder case. Seeing Chung-ho's interest, Do-ha asks him to find the footage since he wants to send the suspects to prison. Do-ha gives Chung-ho some cash and tells him to pretend to be the obedient lawyer the suspects want while secretly searching for the camera footage. Chung-ho starts by asking his partner at the law firm to investigate the 3 suspects. The next day, Chung-ho visits Gucheon prison to meet his 3 clients, who are in a luxurious cell. One of the suspects, Do-gun, a lawyer for Gucheon University Hospital, gives Chung-ho a script to memorize for the trial. Soon, another suspect, Jung Chae-bong, the son of the chairman of the Gucheon University Foundation, gets a call from Do-ha. He learns that a lawyer told the prosecutor about the car dashboard camera footage. This news panics the 3 suspects, and they tell Chung-ho to leave. Before leaving, Chung-ho plants a bug to listen to their conversations. Chung-ho discovers that the footage is hidden by the suspects and is now with Hae-jin, the wife of Han Jae-ho, a surgeon at the hospital. He tells Do-ha and shares his suspicion that someone else is involved in the case. Do-ha and Chung-ho hurry to meet Hae-jin, who is filming at a TV station. While Hae-jin is alone, someone attacks her. Hearing her scream, they rush in, but the attacker escapes. They then question Hae-jin about the footage. At first, she denies having it, but after Chung-ho plays a recording of their conversation, she admits to hiding it on her husband's orders. Hae-jin refuses to give them the footage, so Chung-ho threatens her with the legal consequences of hiding evidence. He asks about other accomplices, and in desperation, she reveals that Gong Ji-hoon, the president of the media company Gukdong Daily, is involved. Finally, Chung-ho goes with Hae-jin to retrieve the dashboard camera footage. After giving Chung-ho the recording, Hae-jin warns him to be careful with the murder case because his safety and the safety of his loved ones are at risk. That evening, Chung-ho watches the dashboard camera footage, which shows the 3 suspects killing Professor So because he refused to give them an important paper. In the footage, Chae-bong is seen talking on the phone after the murder, and Chung-ho suspects he is speaking to Ji-hoon. Chung-ho then looks into Ji-hoon's background and discovers that Ji-hoon has been involved in several criminal cases, including molestation. Meanwhile, Mi-ho is shocked when court officials arrive to confiscate valuable furniture from their home because Chung-ho hasn't paid off his debt, which is overdue. When Chung-ho learns that the court will seize his father-in-law's property, he rushes home to beg Mi-ho for forgiveness. He feels more confident because he has received some money from Do-ha as a down payment for handling Professor So's murder case. Mi-ho asks where he got the money, but he only tells her and his father-in-law that he is working on a big case. The next day, Chung-ho secretly goes to meet Ji-hoon, hoping to sell the dashboard camera footage for 3 billion won. However, Ji-hoon is not interested in the footage because it doesn't prove his involvement in the murder and kicks Chung-ho out. At the same time, Do-ha becomes suspicious of Chung-ho when he can't reach him, and Chung-ho gives various excuses to avoid meeting. Despite his frustration, Do-ha agrees to meet Chung-ho the next day. Chung-ho tells Do-ha that he plans to give the videotape to the prosecutor handling Professor So's murder case instead of to Do-ha, who had previously asked for it. Back in the present, after drinking iced coffee given by a restaurant waiter, Chung-ho suddenly feels dizzy while driving and has an accident. He survives the crash, but when he wakes up, he remembers the video evidence on his phone. However, Mi-ho tells him that the car was so badly damaged that it had to be destroyed, and the evidence is now lost. It didn't stop there. Chung-ho is shocked when the police show up to arrest him for allegedly using drugs before the accident. He realizes that the waiter who gave him the drink might have been ordered by someone to frame him. Since the accusations involve drugs, he suspects Ji-hoon, who he saw using drugs when they met. Chung-ho asks Do-ha for help, but Do-ha refuses because Chung-ho didn't hand over the videotape to him as requested. Do-ha says that if Chung-ho had given him the tape, he wouldn't be in this trouble. In the end, Chung-ho accepts his misfortune. He is sent to Gucheon Prison, the worst and most dangerous prison in South Korea. Soon after, he is taken to a room where the 3 suspects from Professor So's murder case and other inmates are waiting for him. Chae-bong and the others plan to kill Chung-ho for betraying them by hanging him. At the same time, Do-ha, who is attending an event with Ji-hoon, is surprised by a news broadcast that reveals Chung-ho's identity as the Big Mouse, a legendary swindler involved in major fraud, murder, and drug trafficking. The police found billions of won in cash and gold bullion in Chung-ho's office, leading them to conclude he is the Big Mouse. The Big Mouse is known in the criminal world as a mastermind behind various crimes, and his identity has always been a mystery until now. Ji-hoon quickly calls the chief warden, Yoon-gab, and tells him to keep Chung-ho alive, explaining that Chung-ho is the Big Mouse, who stole billions of won from him. Yoon-gab follows Ji-hoon's orders and rushes medics to save Chung-ho, who had stopped breathing after being hanged for a few minutes. Chung-ho is rescued and placed in a holding cell, where the other inmates are shocked to learn that a legendary criminal like the Big Mouse is among them. Chung-ho is devastated to be accused of being the Big Mouse and wonders why everyone believes he is this criminal mastermind. Shortly after, he watches the news on television, where his wife bravely tells reporters that her husband is innocent and she will do everything to prove it. The next day, Chung-ho is interrogated by a prosecutor named Choi Jung-rak, who asks if he is the Big Mouse. Upon hearing the accusation, Chung-ho denies it. However, Jung-rak forces him to admit he is the Big Mouse because the lie detector shows he lied when he said he wasn't. Rumors about Chung-ho being the Big Mouse spread throughout the prison. But not all prisoners believe it because the Big Mouse never revealed his identity to anyone. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon visits the 3 suspects in prison and tells them not to hurt Chung-ho. Ji-hoon wants to investigate first if he really is the Big Mouse because he plans to pressure Chung-ho to return all the money. During lunch, Chung-ho is approached by Chun-sik, the most respected senior inmate. Chun-sik wants to prove that Chung-ho is the Big Mouse by challenging him. If Chung-ho fought fiercely, he might be the Big Mouse. Unfortunately, Chung-ho shows a different attitude, making other prisoners doubt if he is the Big Mouse. Chun-sik and the prison warden also want to prove the Big Mouse's real identity on Ji-hoon's orders. Yoon-gab even offers a delicious meal to make Chung-ho admit he is the Big Mouse and return Ji-hoon's money. However, Chung-ho insists he is not the Big Mouse. Annoyed, Yoon-gab beats him and puts him in solitary confinement for 5 days. A few days later, Chung-ho is visited by Soon-tae, who tells him that Mi-ho and her father are struggling to prove his innocence in the drug and the Big Mouse cases. Knowing Mi-ho and his father-in-law are suffering because of his situation, Chung-ho decides to divorce Mi-ho so she can start a new life with someone who can make her happy. Chung-ho feels he might end up with a life sentence, or even the death penalty. He worries that Mi-ho will suffer if she stays with him. Desperate, Chung-ho decides to end his life, but after several failed attempts, he looks for someone to kill him. The next day, he provokes Chun-sik to kill him. However, during the fight, Chung-ho knocks Chun-sik unconscious with one hit. The inmates are shocked because it seems the rumors about Chung-ho being the Big Mouse are true. Chung-ho then looks for another violent inmate, hoping to be killed. He confronts a prisoner named Kwang-yun, a psychopath and sadistic killer. But his plan fails again because Kwang-yun is very afraid of the Big Mouse's reputation as the most feared criminal in the underworld. With Chun-sik and Kwang-yun defeated, most of the prisoners in Gucheon prison believed that Chung-ho was the Big Mouse, so they respected him greatly. Despite this, Chung-ho still wants to end his life and makes a plan to escape, hoping the prison officers will shoot him during his attempt. That night, Chung-ho tries to escape. Just as the officers are about to shoot, the warden orders them to keep him alive and puts him in solitary confinement. Yoon-gab wants to kill him but remembers Ji-hoon's order to keep him alive because Ji-hoon believes Chung-ho is the Big Mouse. Outside the prison, Mi-ho works hard to prove her husband is not a bad person. Since no one believes her, she decides to discover the truth about Professor So's murder by working as a nurse at Gucheon University Hospital. She aims to find the important paper her husband mentioned, which is key evidence in the murder case. Mi-ho also plans to investigate the doctors and staff at the hospital who might have conspired with the 3 suspects. However, her job is difficult because her senior colleagues don't like her and often make things hard for her. Mi-ho doesn't care about the intimidation from her co-workers. What bothers her more is that the hospital refuses to treat patients who haven't paid, even if they are in extreme pain or dying. The scene then shifts to the prisoners gathered in the hall, where the head warden stands on a podium and talks about the caste system in the prison. The inmates are divided into 4 castes, with those in the highest caste receiving special treatment. A prisoner can reach the highest caste by either bribing the head warden or having good relations with important government officials. Those who can't do either are placed in the lowest caste and must work hard during their sentence. Chung-ho objects to this, saying that bribery is against the law and it is wrong for a warden to act this way. However, Yoon-gab insists that as the chief warden, he has full power in the prison and can act as he pleases. Unable to defend himself, Chung-ho is placed in the lowest caste along with other prisoners who don't meet the warden's requirements. They are assigned to clean the clogged sewers. Besides doing hard labor all day, these prisoners are treated poorly and don't get proper food. They have no choice but to accept their fate. The next day, while working in the field, Chung-ho is suddenly attacked by a prisoner trying to stab him. The attacker was ordered by the 3 suspects in the Professor So murder case. However, the prison guards rush to help him, preventing the attack. After the attack, Chung-ho is called to the warden's office. Yoon-gab tells him that he is only alive because Ji-hoon believes he is the Big Mouse. Yoon-gab warns that if Ji-hoon finds out he is not the Big Mouse, he and his family, including Mi-ho and his father-in-law, will be killed. Hearing the threats against his family, Chung-ho becomes furious and insists he will kill anyone who harms his family, especially Mi-ho. He boldly claims that he is the real Big Mouse. Yoon-gab, who was initially arrogant, becomes scared after hearing Chung-ho's stern declaration. Realizing the danger Ji-hoon and his gang pose, Chung-ho decides to pretend to be the Big Mouse to protect his family. To convince the prisoners he is the Big Mouse, Chung-ho plans a rebellion to ensure fair treatment for the lowest caste prisoners. He starts by leading the prisoners to bring buckets of dirt from the sewers and throws dirt at the guards, demanding they bring better food for the lowest caste prisoners. Yoon-gab and Ji-hoon's gang arrive to stop the chaos, but Chung-ho uses the moment to threaten them if they harm him or his family. Scared, Yoon-gab orders his men to treat the lowest caste prisoners better. More inmates begin to believe Chung-ho is the Big Mouse. Sometime later, Chang-ho is surprised by a visit from Mi-ho. He feels very sad seeing her burdened face, blaming himself for her suffering. Mi-ho discusses the divorce lawsuit Chang-ho filed, hoping she can start a new life. However, she insists she will never divorce him and will continue to fight by his side to reveal the truth and prove his innocence. Seeing Mi-ho struggle, Chang-ho finds a new purpose in life and decides to survive in prison, no matter what. He will continue to pretend to be the big mouse to take revenge on those who put him in this situation. The next day, Chang-ho asks Jerry, one of his followers in prison, to spread the word that he can grant any wish of the prisoners without conditions. The news quickly spreads, and the inmates begin to wonder if he can really fulfill their wishes. Although Chang-ho already has a good reputation as the big mouse, the prisoners are still skeptical. Only Kwang-yun and an inmate named No Park come to see him and make their requests. After listening, Chang-ho promises to do his best to grant them. Meanwhile, the three suspects in Professor So's murder plot to kill Chang-ho and ask the warden for help. Yoon-gab initially refuses because Ji-hoon ordered him to keep Chang-ho alive, and he doesn't want to disobey Ji-hoon. However, after Chaibong and his comrades offer a reward of 300 million won, Yoon-gab agrees to help them kill Chang-ho. In the holding cell, Chang-ho is surprised when Lee, the inmate who previously attacked him, apologizes and says he regrets his actions. Chaibong had ordered Lee and others to kill Chang-ho, but their attempts fail because Chang-ho is protected by his fellow inmates. The next day, under the warden's direction, they manage to corner Chang-ho when he is alone. However, Chang-ho's men quickly come to his aid. Surprisingly, Kwang-yun betrays Chang-ho by colluding with Chaibong. He takes out a knife and tries to stab Chang-ho, but No Park steps in and saves him by sacrificing himself. Yoon-gab, watching the chaos on CCTV, orders his men to stop the fighting to avoid bigger problems. Chaibong and his comrades are visibly irritated by their failed plan. Meanwhile, Mi-ho is still unable to find clues or evidence about Professor So's murder at the hospital. During a meeting with the doctors and medics, she boldly announces that she has the late Professor So's unpublished paper. Everyone becomes silent and gives her cynical looks. Mi-ho says this to gauge their reactions and hopes to attract someone's attention. Unexpectedly, Do-ha is the first to approach her to discuss Professor So's paper. When they meet, Mi-ho confronts him, accusing him of involving her husband in the problem that led to Chang-ho's imprisonment. However, Do-ha denies it and says that Chang-ho was sent to prison because of his own actions. A few days later, the prison is in an uproar when Lee is found dead, hanging in his cell. Many prisoners do not believe he took his own life and think that the big mouse killed him. One day, Ji-hoon visits Chang-ho in prison to see if he is really the big mouse or just pretending. Ji-hoon asks Chang-ho to name 5 loyal customers who always buy drugs from the big mouse. If Chang-ho is the big mouse, he would know their names. Ji-hoon gives him 4 days to come up with the names, warning that if he is wrong, Ji-hoon will kill him and his family. After Ji-hoon leaves, Chang-ho quickly calls Do-ha to propose a deal. Chang-ho tells Do-ha that Ji-hoon was involved in Professor So's murder, and he wants to prove it. He asks Do-ha to help find out the names of the big mouse's drug customers and give him the information within 4 days. Soon after, the prisoners are shocked when 2 inmates die after drinking poison. Although the CCTV footage shows they drank the poison willingly, the prisoners believe the big mouse is responsible. The prison guards search Chang-ho's cell, but find no evidence linking him to the incident. Meanwhile, Mi-ho, who feels she is being stalked, asks her father to help catch the stalker. They discover that the stalker is Do-ha's assistant, who was ordered by Do-ha to watch over her for her safety, especially after she mentioned Professor So's paper as important evidence. Before leaving, Do-ha gives Mi-ho a slip of paper with the names of the big mouse's customers who buy drugs in large quantities. He got this information from Jung Rak, a prosecutor he knows. The next day, Mi-ho visits Chang-ho in prison and gives him the list of names. In the prison, the inmates make bets on whether Chang-ho is the big mouse. Many are enthusiastic and bet that he is. At the same time, Ji-hoon tells Do-ha that the list of clients Jung Rak gave is fake. He knows this because Do-ha helped Chang-ho get the list. Hearing this, Do-ha rushes to the prison to warn Chang-ho that the list is fake. Unfortunately, Do-ha cannot speak to Chang-ho directly, and they only exchange glances. Later, Chang-ho and Ji-hoon sit opposite each other and write the names of the big mouse's 5 biggest clients on a piece of paper, which they hand over to the warden. When Yoon-gab reads it, He is shocked to see that Chang-ho wrote the same names as Ji-hoon, proving that Chang-ho is the big mouse. The prisoners who bet on Chang-ho celebrate their win, while the three suspects in Professor So's murder are shocked to discover he is the respected criminal, the big mouse. Ji-hoon then demands that Chang-ho return the 100 billion won he stole. Ji-hoon reveals that one of the big mouse's men, Peter Hong, who helped the big mouse trick them, has been caught, making it hard for the big mouse to avoid his crimes. Soon after, Yoon-gab gets a call from the prosecution to bring Chang-ho to the prosecutor investigating the fraud case against Ji-hoon and his group. In the interrogation room, Peter looks scared when he sees Chang-ho next to him. Desperate, Peter tries to inject something into his body and ends up dying from poisoning. Ji-hoon is very upset that the only witness in the big mouse fraud case died before he could testify. He then asks Do-ha about Mi-ho hiding Professor So's paper. Do-ha says Mi-ho is bluffing and confirms that she doesn't have the paper. Meanwhile, Mi-ho, about to leave the hospital, notices a woman fixated on a TV broadcast showing Hyun Joo-hee, the deputy director of Gucheon University Hospital and Do-ha's wife. The woman stares at Joo-hee's cross necklace, reminding Mi-ho that Professor So had asked her to make a cross necklace pendulum to store a microchip. Mi-ho decides to investigate the link between Joo-hee and Professor So. Later, Ji-hoon calls Mi-ho to meet at a restaurant where Do-ha has planted a bug to listen to their talk. Ji-hoon offers to buy Professor So's paper for Mi-ho. Realizing his plan to frame her, she refuses, saying she will use the paper to uncover the truth about Professor So's murder and clear her husband's name. Ji-hoon warns her to stop caring about Chang-ho, claiming he is the real big mouse. Mi-ho smiles, knowing Chang-ho is pretending. As she leaves, Ji-hoon warns that anyone with Professor So's paper is in danger. Mi-ho insists she isn't afraid because her husband is the big mouse. Elsewhere, Mi-ho's father and Soon-tae investigate a lake house Professor So visited before his death. They learn that Professor So often visited with a woman, appearing affectionate like a couple. In prison, Jerry distributes winnings to prisoners who bet on Chang-ho, with Chun-sik winning because he believes Chang-ho is the big mouse. At the same time, Chang-ho receives 300 million won in cash from Chaibong and his friends because he proved he is the real big mouse. Yoon-gab is surprised that Chang-ho is giving him more commission than they agreed on. Chang-ho also gives money to become a VIP prisoner and plans to throw a big party for all the prisoners. When he enters the cafeteria, Chang-ho is welcomed like a king, with all the prisoners cheering his name. Even Chun-sik, who was the most respected prisoner, recognizes the big mouse's power and looks happy to see him. Meanwhile, Chaibong and his friends are worried that the big mouse has taken control in prison, which could threaten their lives. Soon after, Chang-ho approaches them with his men and tells Chaibong and his friends to admit their guilt in court if they want to survive. That night at the hospital, Mi-ho sees the head nurse, Mi-young, taking a blood sample from a patient without permission. Mi-ho secretly follows Mi-young to the research lab in the basement. She sneaks in but is caught by Joo-hee, who comes with a security guard. Joo-hee scolds Mi-ho for being in a restricted area. Mi-ho apologizes and explains she followed the head nurse. But the guard says no one else went in. Joo-hee tells Mi-ho to leave and instructs the guard not to let anyone enter the lab without permission. A few days later, Chang-ho, now very influential in prison, teams up with Chun-sik to pressure Chaibong and his friends into confessing their crimes. Soon after, Chang-ho and his men drag Jae-ho into the room where they once tried to kill him. Chang-ho asks Jae-ho to confess to Professor So's murder in the car. When Jae-ho refuses, Chang-ho orders his men to hang him. Chang-ho only wants to scare Jae-ho and keeps him alive. After experiencing near death and realizing Chang-ho is serious, Jae-ho agrees to reveal the truth about Professor So's murder in court. Elsewhere, Do-ha meets Mi-ho and claims that Chang-ho is the real big mouse. He also reveals that the list of names from the prosecutor was fake. However, Chang-ho knows the real list, proving he is the big mouse. Do-ha tells her that a witness who saw the big mouse's face was terrified and ended his life after meeting Chang-ho. Besides that, all the prisoners who tried to kill Chang-ho in prison have died mysteriously. Although Mi-ho is shocked and upset by Do-ha's words, she tries to trust her husband. On her way home, Mi-ho gets a call from her father, who tells her that Chang-ho has paid off all their debts in cash. Hearing this, she starts crying, thinking that Do-ha might be right about Chang-ho being the real big mouse. The next day, The prison warden announces that volunteers from Gucheon University Hospital will conduct medical checkups on all the prisoners. Besides Miho, Haejin, Han Jae-ho's wife who is good at cooking, will also be there to make delicious dishes for the prisoners. When Miho enters the hall, the prisoners bow to her because she is the Big Mouse's wife. A prison guard named Suchul meets Miho and says he will take her to Chang-ho in the VIP cell. When she meets Chang-ho, she asks him if he is the real the Big Mouse with a disappointed look. Chang-ho tells her that someone knocked him out when he read the list of clients Do-ha gave him. When he woke up, he found a tarot card with a different list of names. He realized that the list Do-ha gave him was fake, and the names on the tarot cards were real. Chang-ho also says he always gets messages from the Big Mouse through tarot cards in the Bible. He thinks the Big Mouse might be in prison watching him, so he has to keep pretending to be the Big Mouse. Meanwhile, Haejin reunites with her husband, who is in prison. But he beats her and accuses her of having an affair while he was in prison. Blinded by jealousy, Jae-ho hurts her but lets go when she convinces him she isn't cheating. He then apologizes and says he will be released soon. At the same time, Chang-ho enters the prison hall and is greeted like a king. He warns Mi-young to stop bullying Miho and exposes the secrets of Mi-young's husband and other volunteers, including Ji-hoon's wife, Ashley Kim. However, when he meets Ju-hee, he asks her to take care of Miho. On her way home, Miho sees someone else's hand on Haejin's neck, indicating that someone might have strangled her. She becomes curious about who strangled Haejin in prison. Elsewhere, Ji-hoon and Do-ha meet an old man named Kang Sung-gun, the chairman of the NR Forum, of which Ji-hoon and Do-ha are members. Ji-hoon asks Chairman Kang to help free Chae-bong and his friends. But Chairman Kang rejects the request because the judge handling the case is not on his side. Hearing this, Do-ha offers to help Ji-hoon because he knows the judge well. Ji-hoon feels irritated, thinking Do-ha is trying to win Chairman Kang's favor to become the new chairman after Sung-gun retires. That night, Miho gets information from a woman named Kyung-suk about Professor So's paper being hidden in a cross necklace. Believing the woman with the necklace is Ju-hee, Miho rushes to her and tries to confirm it. But she is wrong because nothing is inside Ju-hee's cross necklace. Miho apologizes for breaking Ju-hee's precious necklace. After realizing Ju-hee is not the person Kyung-suk mentioned, Miho watches a TV rerun and sees that Haejin also wears a cross necklace. Meanwhile, in prison, Chang-ho texts the Big Mouse to help send Chae-bong and his friends to prison for Professor So's murder. But the Big Mouse tells him to handle it his way. Chang-ho then threatens Jae-ho again to tell the truth in court, or he will burn him alive. Elsewhere, Haejin is frustrated by the constant violence from Jae-ho during their marriage. She recalls how Professor So helped her after Jae-ho beat her. They grew close and eventually fell in love. When Haejin opens the cross necklace pendant that Professor So gave her, she discovers that Professor So's paper, which everyone is looking for, has been with her all along. The next day, Chae-bong and Do-gun are happy to be released from prison. But Jae-ho is found to be working with the Big Mouse, so the head warden puts him in solitary confinement. On the other hand, Chang-ho is shocked to learn that Chun-sik has betrayed him and is now siding with Chae-bong and Do-gun. Chae-bong laughs and taunts Chang-ho for being so easily betrayed. After ordering Chun-sik to kill Chang-ho, Chae-bong and Do-gun rush out of Gucheon prison. But once they leave, Chang-ho laughs, revealing that they've all been fooled. Meanwhile, Jae-ho is not in solitary confinement, but is held captive by Chun-sik and his men, who were ordered by Ji-hoon to kill him. As one of Chun-sik's men is about to kill Jae-ho, Chang-ho suddenly appears with his men and rescues Jae-ho. During the fight, Chang-ho saves Jae-ho and takes him to the infirmary. There, he tells Jae-ho that Ji-hoon planned to kill him in prison and make him a scapegoat while clearing their own names. Chang-ho asks Jae-ho to reveal the truth about the murder case so that Ji-hoon and the others get the punishment they deserve. However, Jae-ho is scared, not of Ji-hoon but of the powerful people behind him. When Chang-ho asks who they are, Jae-ho refuses to say more, fearing for his life. It turns out that the fight between Chang-ho's men and Chun-sik's group was just a setup because Chun-sik never betrayed Chang-ho. It was all part of a plan to uncover the conspiracy behind Professor So's murder. Meanwhile, Miho attends the funeral of a patient at Gucheon University Hospital. She overhears the patient's family asking the hospital not to perform an autopsy and to bury the body in a specific cemetery instead of a public one. Hearing this, Miho decides to investigate and tries to take a sample of the patient's blood before the body is cremated. She sneaks into the morgue to get the blood sample. But when she leaves, she is surprised to find the hospital's deputy director and the head nurse waiting for her, as if they knew her plan. Joo-hee tells Mi-young to search Miho's bag. Since they find nothing suspicious, they let her go. Later, while Miho is at work, she sneaks back into the morgue and takes another blood sample. She is then attacked by a mysterious man who tries to kill her. Do-ha, who happens to be nearby, rushes to help her, but the man escapes. Miho believes the man was trying to stop her from investigating the blood sample. After confirming that the sample is still with her, she feels relieved and rushes to send it to a friend at the National Forensic Service. She tells Do-ha that the blood sample might reveal why Professor So was killed. Meanwhile, in prison, Chang-ho goes to the chapel to get tarot cards from the Big Mouse, usually hidden in the scriptures. Chang-ho, determined to uncover the real the Big Mouse, secretly installs a camera inside one of the statues with Sun-tae's help, who also gives him a cell phone hidden in a book. When Chang-ho checks the camera footage, he is shocked to see Jerry entering the chapel and holding a tarot card from the Big Mouse. He thinks Jerry might be the real the Big Mouse, especially since Jerry has always been kind to him since he first entered the prison. Shortly afterward, Chang-ho confronts Jerry about it, but Jerry denies taking the tarot cards. Chang-ho then sends Jerry away and gets a call from Miho, who says she received flowers and tarot cards. Knowing tarot cards are the Big Mouse's trademark, Chang-ho realizes the Big Mouse is trying to warn him through her. This means the Big Mouse knows about the hidden cameras. However, the only ones who know about the hidden camera and his plan to reveal the Big Mouse's identity are Miho, Miho's father, and Sun-tae. On the other hand, Jerry, who knows that the Big Mouse always sends orders through tarot cards, realizes that Chang-ho is not the real the Big Mouse and feels disappointed. A few days later, Jerry is surprised by a visit from his younger sister, Young-so, who tells him that a good person is willing to pay for his studies, and that person is Ji-hoon. Jerry is shocked when Ji-hoon appears and says Jerry will be released that day. As he is about to be released, Jerry buys drinks for the prisoners he shares with, including Chang-ho. Ji-hoon tells him to poison Chang-ho's drink. At first, Jerry refuses because he doesn't want to kill Chang-ho. But Ji-hoon assures him that the poison will only cause a stomachache, not death. Hearing this, Jerry obeys Ji-hoon's orders. When Chang-ho falls ill, the prison guards rush him to the hospital. At the same time, Miho arrives with her father and is informed by Jerry that Chang-ho is in an ambulance that just left the prison. The three of them chase the ambulance, which is not heading to the hospital. Miho tries to overtake the ambulance and forces the guards to take her husband to the hospital, threatening to report them for neglecting their duty. They finally arrive at the hospital, and Chang-ho receives immediate medical treatment. After that, Miho and her father thank Jerry for helping Chang-ho. They also give him some money to show their gratitude. Jerry refuses the money at first, but Miho insists, so he finally accepts it and leaves. Meanwhile, while Chang-ho is asleep, a policeman sneaks into his room to take his thumbprint on Ji-hoon's orders. The next day, Chang-ho is taken back to prison because he has recovered. On the way, he remembers being told about a toxic substance in his intestines and realizes Jerry tried to poison him. He thinks Jerry did it on someone else's orders. As they head to Gucheon prison, Chang-ho notices they are taking him somewhere else. He tries to escape, but the guards sedate him until he is unconscious. Chang-ho is taken to the Jiseong Mental Center after Ji-hoon manipulates the police and prosecutors to send him to a mental hospital. Ji-hoon and Jung-rak then arrive to inject him with a truth serum to find out where he hid the billions of won. After being injected, Chang-ho hallucinates, seeing a giant rat and many small rats swarming around him. He faints from the serum side effects. In his dream, Chang-ho remembers his past when he first met Miho's father, who was a police officer. It is revealed that Chang-ho came from an orphanage and had no parents or close relatives. Chang-ho and Miho have been friends for a long time, and she cares about him because he is an orphan. Even though Miho still has her father, she understands what it is like not to have a mother and can relate to his feelings. Back in the present, Chang-ho wakes up and carelessly tells the location of the money because he doesn't know where the Big Mouse hid it. Ji-hoon and his men rush to the location and find a gold bar buried there. Ji-hoon, annoyed that he couldn't find the money, returns to Chang-ho and shows him the gold bar. Chang-ho is surprised because he had made up the location. He assumes the Big Mouse has been watching him all along and hopes the Big Mouse will save him, While Chang-ho is in the mental hospital, Jae-ho is released. Hae-jin is scared and depressed, so Mi-ho visits her and tries to convince her to divorce Jae-ho. However, Hae-jin refuses, fearing Jae-ho's torture. Elsewhere, Joo-hee meets Chairman Kong, whose health is worsening, and pleads with him to make her husband the next chairman. But Chairman Kong thinks Do-ha is unfit for the position and wants Joo-hee to take it. When Chairman Kong falls asleep, Joo-hee asks Do-ha to look after him, but Do-ha wants to kill him. Meanwhile, at the mental hospital, the Big Mouse's men started a rescue mission to get Chang-ho out. Even though he had to fight a lot of hospital staff trying to kill him, Chang-ho managed to defeat the big man and escape with Jerry's help. The head nurse saw Chang-ho escaping and ordered the guards to chase him. Jerry took Chang-ho to a tunnel where the Big Mouse had a car ready. Jerry told Chang-ho to leave quickly while he distracted the guards because the Big Mouse paid him to do so. Soon after, Chang-ho found the car Jerry mentioned. Inside, there was a cell phone, some cash, and clothes for him to change into as a disguise. After changing, Chang-ho drove the car to the highway. But he was shocked to see Jerry unconscious and covered in blood. Jerry had tried to break through a police and guard blockade and had a terrible accident. In another place, Mi-ho tried to convince Hae-jin to work with her. She also asked her father and Soon-tae to persuade a famous online content creator to talk about Professor So's murder case on her YouTube channel. Mi-ho wanted everyone to know the truth about Professor So's murder. At the same time, Chang-ho was very anxious about passing through a checkpoint as a fugitive, but he was surprised when a police officer let him pass, showing that the Big Mouse had a vast network, even within the police. Chang-ho finally arrived at a hotel where the Big Mouse had prepared everything for him to do his job well. Thanks to Mi-ho's efforts, the news about Professor So's murder became a trending topic on social media and a hot topic in society. Ji-hoon and his men became even more worried, especially after learning that Chang-ho had escaped the mental hospital. Not long after, Ji-hoon received a call from Hae-jin, who told him that she had Professor So's paper. She said she would give it to him if he convinced Jae-ho to divorce her. Hae-jin also threatened to give the paper to the Big Mouse if he didn't agree. Jae-ho refused to divorce her, but Ji-hoon warned her that if the paper became public, Chairman Kong would also be affected. Finally, the day of Professor So's murder trial arrived. Journalists were waiting at the courthouse for the open trial. At the same time, the content creator started live streaming on his YouTube channel with Chang-ho as the guest star. During the live stream, Chang-ho predicted that Chae-bong and the other two suspects would be acquitted of all charges. Mi-ho, who was in the courtroom, watched the live stream and commented on the trial. Several people around her watched the live stream on their phones. Ji-hoon, aware of the live stream, orders his men to track down Chang-ho while continuing to detail his predictions about Professor So's murder trial, which he and his henchmen have carefully planned. The situation becomes chaotic due to Chang-ho's live streaming, prompting Jung-rak to request a break from the judge until things calm down. The judge agrees, granting a 30-minute break. During this time, Jung-rak discusses the next steps with Ji-hoon and his men. In the middle of their discussion, Ji-hoon gets a call from Hae-jin, who is at a cafe across from the courthouse. She demands the divorce papers within 20 minutes or threatens to give the papers to the Big Mouse. Ji-hoon then arranges for the court to issue the divorce papers and forces Hae-jin to sign them. He rushes to meet her, exchanging the divorce papers for a microchip. Ji-hoon asks Hae-jin about the Big Mouse's location, and she tells him. With this information, Ji-hoon orders Jung-rak to send the police to the location Hae-jin mentioned. Meanwhile, Chang-ho is discussing Professor So's paper, which is the real motive behind the murder. However, the investigating prosecutor ignores the paper and removes crucial evidence, leading to the three suspects being acquitted. As Chae-bong, Do-gun, and Jae-ho leave the courthouse, reporters surround them, seeking statements about the murder case. Before they can speak, a truck arrives and shows the ongoing live stream on a screen. Everyone's attention shifts to the screen, displaying Ji-hoon and Hae-jin at the cafe. It turns out Chang-ho set up a hidden camera to broadcast their conversation live. Ji-hoon admits the importance of Professor So's paper, indirectly proving the three suspects killed Professor So because of the paper. Ji-hoon's assistant informs him that their conversation is being recorded and broadcast live on YouTube. Ji-hoon tries to find and destroy the hidden camera. Soon after, Chang-ho arrives at the courthouse and tells Jung-rak to appeal to the judge because of Ji-hoon's statements about Professor So's paper. Jung-rak is forced to appeal, dragging Chaibong and his comrades back to court, with everyone watching. Chang-ho then reveals that he didn't escape prison but was kidnapped by Ji-hoon and Jung-rak and taken to a mental hospital. When the police arrive, Chang-ho is taken away, about to be sent back to prison. Before leaving, he says goodbye to his loved ones, and Soon-tae informs him that Jerry survived the accident that nearly killed him. Realizing that Jerry might know the big mouse, Chang-ho asks Soon-tae to visit Jerry at the hospital. When he arrives, Soon-tae slips a letter under Jerry's pillow because Jerry is asleep, and he doesn't want to wake him. The letter is from Chang-ho, thanking Jerry for risking his life to save him. Later, a doctor finds the letter and gives it to Jerry when he wakes up. The doctor has a tattoo on his wrist, a sign of the Big Mouse's followers. When Jerry gets the letter, he tears it up. Meanwhile, Chang-ho returns to prison and is welcomed warmly by the inmates, who are impressed by his actions during his escape. Soon after, No Park tells Chang-ho about a strange disease spreading in the prison. Some prisoners, who were previously healthy, suddenly become aggressive, vomit blood, and then fall unconscious. This disease only affects well-behaved prisoners who never cause trouble. Ji-hoon visits Chang-ho in prison and tells him he didn't plan Professor So's murder, but he refuses to reveal who did. Meanwhile, Chaibong and his friends meet Chairman Kong, begging for his help. However, Chairman Kong refuses because of their bad behavior. Do-ha arrives and gives Chairman Kong an envelope containing Professor So's paper. It is revealed that Do-ha is the mastermind behind Professor So's murder. He wanted the paper, caused Chang-ho's accident, took the dashboard camera recording from Chang-ho's phone, and destroyed the evidence. Do-ha planned everything and ordered the 3 suspects to follow his instructions to avoid prison. That night, he enters a secret room filled with cash and gold, placing the microchip with Professor So's paper there. The next day, Miho is forced to resign from Gucheon University Hospital after Joo-hee discovers she secretly gave a patient's blood sample to the National Forensic Agency. Although nothing suspicious was found, Miho still suspects Joo-hee and the hospital staff. At the same time, Chang-ho texts the Big Mouse, asking to meet him in prison. Surprisingly, the Big Mouse replies through tarot cards, indicating he will meet Chang-ho at 8 o'clock that night in the prison chapel. At 8 o'clock at night, Chang-ho sits alone in the chapel. He hears footsteps and is surprised to see the chief warden, Yoon-gab, enter. Chang-ho asks Yoon-gab if he is the Big Mouse. Yoon-gab shows his tattoo, the mark of the Big Mouse, and says he killed the 3 inmates and gave Chang-ho the real client list. However, when Chang-ho asks about the gold, Yoon-gab refuses to answer. Yoon-gab insists on knowing the contents of Professor So's paper, but Chang-ho, doubting Yoon-gab is the Big Mouse, refuses to tell. Chang-ho realizes that all of the Big Mouse's men have the tattoo, but the Big Mouse is not their leader. He tells Yoon-gab to have the Big Mouse meet him directly if he wants to know about the paper and threatens to destroy it if his family is harmed. Meanwhile, Do-ha watches a documentary about Chairman Kang's past. He sees a photo of Chairman Kong with an old man and 2 boys, one of whom is Do-ha. While Do-ha is deep in thought, Chang-ho calls him, saying he has important information about the Big Mouse and asks Do-ha to come to the prosecutor's office during his questioning. The next day, Miho comes to the prison because she applied for a job as a medical officer there. The warden also calls Mi-young, a nurse from Gucheon University Hospital who also applied. During the job interview, there is a commotion outside as inmates start fighting. Kwang-yun, one of the inmates, suddenly becomes aggressive and attacks others. The guards struggle to control him and have to use electric guns to subdue him. Chun-sik suspects Kwang-yun of taking drugs, but No Park disagrees, saying it's hard to get drugs in prison, especially in large amounts. Suchul checks Kwang-yun and panics when he finds he isn't breathing. Miho rushes to help Kwang-yun, and he starts breathing again. She is praised by the prisoners for saving him. When the ambulance arrives to take Kwang-yun to the hospital, the warden asks Miho to go with him. At the same time, Do-ha agrees to Chang-ho's request and goes to the prosecutor's office. There, he asks Jung-rak to drop the drug charges against Chang-ho. Do-ha recalls that he was the one who had ordered a waitress to give the drink to Chang-ho. Soon after, Chang-ho shows him recorded evidence of a conversation between himself and the warden, who claims to be the Big Mouse. Chang-ho believes Yoon-gab is not the Big Mouse, but an underling pretending to be him on the Big Mouse's orders. He gives the tape to Do-ha and asks Jung-rak to arrest the warden for abuse of power, extortion, and molestation. Meanwhile, The doctor tells Miho, who was in the hospital, that no poison or drugs were found in Kwang Yun's body. She wonders why he is so aggressive and showing serious illness symptoms. Not trusting the doctor, she secretly takes a blood sample from Kwang Yun and tests it herself. While leaving Kwang Yun's treatment room, Miho meets Suchul, who says she can go home now that her work hours are over. Miho realizes she has been accepted to work as a nurse at Gucheon Prison. On her way home, Miho gives someone Kwang Yun's blood sample and asks him to be careful while testing it. The next day, No Park informs Chang-ho that Miho has been accepted to work at Gucheon Prison as a nurse. Chang-ho is very surprised and didn't expect her to take such a risk. Meanwhile, the warden tries to get information from Miho about Professor So's paper. Miho, knowing that Yoon-gab is the big mouse's right-hand man, refuses to tell him anything, even when he threatens her. An angry Chang-ho goes to Yoon-gab's room, thinking Yoon-gab got Miho the prison job. But Yoon-gab denies it, saying Miho applied for the job herself. Yoon-gab then offers Chang-ho a deal to answer each other's important questions honestly. Chang-ho asks why the big mouse is obsessed with Professor So's paper. Yoon-gab replies that someone very dear to the big mouse died because of the paper. Yoon-gab then asks about the contents of Professor So's paper. Chang-ho mentions that the paper talks about blood samples taken from prisoners, but doesn't give more details. He tells Yoon-gab to inform the big mouse that he will reveal the full content of the paper if the big mouse comes to see him. Later, Chang-ho gets permission to see Miho and asks her to resign from her job. But she refuses because she wants to take the prisoners' blood samples herself and test them to uncover the conspiracy behind Professor So's paper. Since she insists, Chang-ho can't refuse her wish, even though he is worried about her safety. Not long after, Jung-rak and several police officers arrive at the prison and immediately arrest Yoon-gab on charges of extortion and mistreating prisoners. During the interrogation, Yoon-gab hears a recorded conversation between him and Chang-ho, where he claims to be the big mouse. Furious, he believes Chang-ho reported him. However, Jung-rak denies this and reveals that Suchul, Yoon-gab's subordinate who wants to replace him as chief warden, made the complaint. Meanwhile, Chang-ho is taken to the VIP cell, where Do-ha introduces him to the new warden, Suchul. Do-ha says that Suchul will help Chang-ho uncover the big mouse's true identity, who might be in prison. In the evening, Joo-hee finishes her work at the hospital and heads home. While driving, she drinks coffee to stay awake, but suddenly feels dizzy and loses control of her car, ending up in an accident similar to Chang-ho's. When Do-ha hears about Joo-hee's accident, he rushes to the hospital. Chang-ho talks to Miho about the accident, suspecting the big mouse is behind it to get revenge on Do-ha for Professor So's murder. At the hospital, Do-ha meets Ji-hoon, who is already there. To Do-ha's surprise, the police decide to take Joo-hee's blood sample because a witness claims she caused the accident while under the influence of alcohol. Do-ha asks the police to thoroughly investigate Joo-hee's accident. He then visits Joo-hee, who is stable but still unconscious after surviving a critical period. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon and Jung-rak call the chief bureau and say the police will find drugs in Joo-hee's blood. Ji-hoon asks to spread this news through their newspaper. Jung-rak questions how he knows there are drugs in her blood. Ji-hoon explains that Joo-hee's accident is similar to what Do-ha did to Chang-ho. Ji-hoon concludes that the big mouse is close to Chang-ho and watching him. He is excited, anticipating the downfall of both Do-ha and the big mouse. The next day, the prisoners are ordered to gather in the hall. Suchul steps up to the podium and announces he is the new warden. He promises not to be arbitrary or discriminatory like Yoon-gab and to treat all prisoners fairly and equally. Suchul also introduces suggestion boxes in several areas so inmates can share their thoughts about prison life. He will consider their opinions as much as possible. Additionally, he plans to search all cells and remove sharp weapons to reduce violence. When the guards search the prison, Suchul orders all the prisoners to enter the changing rooms and take off their clothes. This is done to find the big mouse's men with special tattoos, as shown on the tarot cards. Suchul and Chang-ho finally identify 3 people with the tattoos and start investigating their backgrounds. Chang-ho suggests that Suchul and the guards monitor these 3 to see who they communicate with the most. But Suchul wants to torture them to make them reveal the big mouse. Chang-ho disagrees, arguing that they might have never seen the big mouse. He warns Suchul not to act rashly, as it could backfire. Suchul, irritated by Chang-ho's tone, reminds him that he is the head warden with full power in the prison and that Chang-ho has no right to give orders. Chang-ho responds by saying that he made Su-chul the chief warden, and if Su-chul wants to catch the big mouse, he must follow his advice. Meanwhile, Mi-ho gets a call from Hae-jin, who tells her that a drug substance was found in the blood sample she tested. Hae-jin explains that the drug found in Kwang-yun's blood is a new type that has never been reported in South Korea. She also mentions that Kwang-yun's white blood cell count is 3 times higher than normal, indicating leukemia. Mi-ho recalls that several cancer patients had symptoms similar to Kwang-yun's, and that some well-behaved prisoners recently reported suffering from a mysterious disease. Unbeknownst to Hae-jin, a mysterious man secretly takes photos from a distance. Jae-ho has ordered the man to find Hae-jin, who chose to go abroad after officially divorcing him. Mi-ho goes to Chang-ho to tell him about the blood test results. She explains that Kwang-yun might have leukemia but wonders how certain drugs could cause the disease. Chang-ho points out that Kwang-yun and the model prisoners were given specific supplements different from those taken by other prisoners. They also received work permits to clean rivers and other public areas for a good fee. After learning about Kwang-yun's condition, Mi-ho becomes very angry and vows never to forgive Do-ha for being so cruel. At the hospital, Do-ha tries to calm Ju-hee, who is shocked after learning that she is accused of taking drugs while driving, which caused the accident. Seeing her so devastated, Do-ha promises to do his best to protect her from punishment. He admits that the incident was his fault because he imprisoned Yoon-gab, the big mouse's right-hand man. Afterward, Do-ha's assistant, Jo, gives him the drinking glass that Ju-hee used before her accident. Jo tells his boss that the big mouse used the same method to harm Ju-hee as Do-ha used to harm Chang-ho. Do-ha suspects that Chang-ho has teamed up with the big mouse and that Mi-ho is working in the prison to uncover the truth about Professor So's paper, which mentions blood samples of prisoners. Meanwhile, in prison, Yoon-gab, found guilty of all charges, is sent to Gukcheon prison. On his first day, he gets into a fight with Su-chul, who mocks him now that he is a prisoner. After beating his former superior, Su-chul orders the guards to bring the 3 prisoners who work for the big mouse. Yoon-gab and the 3 prisoners are tied up, and one is hung by his feet, supported by his 2 friends. Su-chul threatens to kill them if Yoon-gab doesn't reveal the big mouse's identity. Yoon-gab insists that neither he nor the others have ever met the big mouse or seen his face. Soon after, Chang-ho arrives and rescues the prisoner. He asks Su-chul to stop, but Su-chul ignores him and orders Chun-sik to kill Yoon-gab. Surprisingly, Chun-sik refuses to kill Yoon-gab and instead wants to beat Su-chul for betraying Yoon-gab, his former superior. After Chang-ho and Chun-sik intimidate him, Su-chul reluctantly releases Yoon-gab and the 3 inmates. Chang-ho then escorts Yoon-gab to his cell and warns him that the prisoners might seek revenge against him, their former warden who used to intimidate them. That evening, Ju-hee asks the head nurse to take her to the hospital's underground laboratory, which only a few people, including Ji-hoon and the 3 suspects in Professor So's murder, have access to. Even with the master key, Ju-hee never discovered what they did there. After seeing the lab, Ju-hee is shocked and asks her husband to take her home. On the way, she tells Do-ha that Professor So is in charge of the lab. When he asks about the lab's contents, Ju-hee changes the subject, wanting to keep it a secret from him. The next day, Su-chul was upset because his name was not on the list of candidates for permanent prison warden. He wanted to ask the mayor about it, since Do-ha had recommended him. But Su-chul was afraid of looking rude if he asked directly. Instead, he complained about Chang-ho supporting Yoon-gab and asked Do-ha if he could punish them his own way. Hearing this, Do-ha allows Su-chul to do whatever he wants. Su-chul then gathers all the prisoners in the hall and brings Yoon-gab and the Big Mouse's men in front of them, revealing their identities as the Big Mouse's men. Su-chul also tells everyone that Chang-ho is not the Big Mouse and that the Big Mouse is hiding in the prison. The prisoners are shocked by Su-chul's words, and so is Chang-ho, who didn't expect Su-chul to reveal his secret. Su-chul then makes a new rule, threatening the inmates if they refuse to help find the Big Mouse. He even offers rewards to those who assist him. When a prisoner tries to hit Yoon-gab to force him to reveal the Big Mouse's identity, Chang-ho steps in to stop him. However, since his cover as the Big Mouse has been blown, the prisoners no longer respect Chang-ho and even fight him. Despite this, Chun-sik still supports him, saying he is as great as the Big Mouse and will stand by him no matter what. Chang-ho then meets Su-chul in the warden's office and asks why he went against their plan. He threatens to report Su-chul's actions to Do-ha, but Do-ha refuses to talk to him. Suchul tells Chang-ho that Do-ha no longer trusts him, so he will pursue his way to find the Big Mouse. A few days later, after Suchul announced that the Big Mouse is in the prison, the inmates begin to suspect each other and accuse those they dislike of being the Big Mouse, causing many prisoners to be put in solitary confinement for no reason. This sparks ongoing disputes and riots among the prisoners. Meanwhile, No Park helps Mi-ho get blood samples from model prisoners to uncover the truth behind Professor So's paper. With Chang-ho having lost his power as the Big Mouse, Suchul warns him not to act arrogantly since he is just a prisoner now. Chang-ho doesn't mind Suchul's warning and is happy that Suchul will work alone to find the Big Mouse, freeing him from the burden. When Chang-ho is alone in the yard, Yoon-gab approaches him and is about to explain why the Big Mouse hasn't killed him, even though he betrayed the Big Mouse by siding with Do-ha. But Chang-ho already knows that the Big Mouse kept him alive because he is the only one trying to uncover the conspiracy behind Professor So's paper. He explains that he is only pretending to side with Do-ha because he has a brilliant plan. Yoon-gab urges Chang-ho to reveal his plan. However, Chang-ho refuses, insisting that he will only inform the Big Mouse directly. He asks Yoon-gab to arrange a meeting with the Big Mouse at the chapel at 8 o'clock in the evening, threatening to cancel his plans if the Big Mouse doesn't show up. Later, Jerry, who is in the hospital, receives a call from someone and asks the doctor to discharge him because he has important things to do that night. Joo-hee also gets a call and tells the caller she will come tonight. Meanwhile, Hae-jin arrives at the airport and is picked up by Mi-ho. Mi-ho tells Hae-jin that she asked Soon-tae and her father to follow the car transporting the model prisoners to their usual work location. However, unbeknownst to Mi-ho and Hae-jin, Jae-ho has been following them from the airport and discovers Hae-jin's whereabouts. At the same time, Soon-tae and Gi-kwang lose track of the car carrying the prisoners when it suddenly changes lanes. Mi-ho then says goodbye to Hae-jin, promising to return later that night. After Mi-ho leaves, Hae-jin is shocked to see Jae-ho appear. She runs to the kitchen, grabs a knife, and threatens to kill herself if he touches her. As she tries to escape, Jae-ho accidentally stabs her, killing her. Do-ha, who has discovered Hae-jin's location, arrives and finds her dead, covered in blood, with Jae-ho sitting nearby, looking disturbed. After his assistant takes Jae-ho away, Do-ha checks Hae-jin's phone and finds messages between her and Mi-ho discussing the prisoner's blood samples. Realizing that Chang-ho and Mi-ho know about his crimes, Do-ha calls Suchul and orders him to kill them. Suchul devises a plan to start a riot among the prisoners. A warden gives a key to a troublesome prisoner, who then frees other prisoners, triggering chaos. That night, the prison descends into chaos as prisoners clash with guards. During the riot, Chun-sik tells his men to stay in their cells and not get involved. Meanwhile, Chang-ho, waiting in the chapel for the Big Mouse, receives a mysterious message directing him to the VIP cell. Shortly after he arrives, the power goes out throughout the prison, all part of Suchul's plan. In the darkness, Chang-ho hears someone enter the cell and sit across from him. When he lights a match to see who it is, he is shocked to see No Park. Meanwhile, the prison guards take firearms from the storage warehouse to confront the prisoners who are holding several guards hostage. The prisoners demand to see Suchul, claiming he is worse than the previous warden. Chang-ho initially doesn't believe No Park is the Big Mouse, having been tricked by Yoon-gab before. But No Park reassures him by mentioning the tarot cards and says that only he can handle the situation. Hearing No Park's firm statement, Chang-ho finally believes that No Park is the Big Mouse. He is surprised that the Big Mouse has been by his side, supporting him since he first entered the prison. Chang-ho asks why No Park chose him and when he planned all this. No Park explains that Chang-ho's involvement with Do-ha and his gang was not his concern at first. However, once Chang-ho provoked them, he was destined to die at their hands. To save him, No Park decided to turn him into the Big Mouse. Chang-ho then asks why No Park is so obsessed with Professor So's paper. No Park reveals that his daughter was killed while investigating the paper, and he is determined to find her killer. Chang-ho suggests gathering evidence of the murder and giving it to the police. This angers No Park, who doesn't trust the laws in the country. He wants to find his daughter's killer and make them pay 1,000 times before killing them. Chang-ho asks if he can be freed once he uncovers the secret behind Professor So's paper. No Park says that Chang-ho will be involved until the end, helping to destroy Do-ha and his gang. No Park chose Chang-ho because his organization is too big for him to handle alone. He wants Chang-ho to become influential in society, equal to Do-ha and his powerful gang. No Park warns that if Chang-ho refuses to cooperate, he will surely die. Hearing this, Chang-ho makes an offer to No Park, who seems to be considering it. Elsewhere, a prison warden overhears a conversation between Soo-chul and his men planning to kill Mi-ho in the medical room. The warden, who is the Big Mouse's subordinate, reports this to his boss. No Park tells Chang-ho to hurry to the medical room because Mi-ho is in danger. On his way, Chang-ho calls Mi-ho and tells her to leave the medical room with Kwang-yun. She quickly packs her things and takes the prisoner's blood samples. However, when Mi-ho tries to leave, she finds the door locked due to the automatic lockdown caused by the riots. Chang-ho tells her to hide in the medical room while he finds a way to reach her. On his way, Chang-ho is confronted by prison guards who beat him up. Just when he feels desperate, Chun-sik and his men arrive to help. Chun-sik tells Chang-ho to go to the medical room while they fight the guards. At the same time, No Park and Yoon-gab appear and guide Chang-ho to the medical room through a secret passage. Meanwhile, Mi-ho is startled by prisoners trying to break in. She manages to fend off one, but two others attack her. Seeing this, Kwang-yun gets up to save her. After he defeats the prisoners, Han, the warden ordered by Soo-chul to kill Mi-ho, appears and shoots Kwang-yun. Despite being shot, Kwang-yun overpowers the warden. As Mi-ho tries to treat him, Soo-chul enters the medical room and points a gun at her. Kwang-yun protects her but is shot again by Soo-chul, knocking him unconscious. Just before Soo-chul can kill Mi-ho, Chang-ho arrives. Furious, Chang-ho beats Soo-chul severely. No Park then signals Yoon-gab to kill Soo-chul, and Yoon-gab follows the order without hesitation. Seeing the chaos escalate, No Park tells Chang-ho that he accepts the offer Chang-ho made earlier in the VIP cell. In return, Chang-ho must keep his promise. Under their agreement, Chang-ho will hand the Big Mouse over to the police and promises to destroy Do-ha and his gang. Since No Park has accepted his offer, Chang-ho tells Ji-hoon that he's caught the Big Mouse. Ji-hoon is overjoyed, thinking he'll get back the 100 billion won that the Big Mouse stole from him. He rushes to tell Jung-rak and the police to come to the prison because Chang-ho has uncovered the Big Mouse's identity. Meanwhile, Do-ha, unable to reach Soo-chul by phone, looks worried and decides to go to the prison. At the gate, Do-ha is surprised to see Ji-hoon, Jung-rak, and several police officers arriving to catch the Big Mouse. After handing the Big Mouse over to Jung-rak and the police, Chang-ho asks Mi-ho to give Ji-hoon the blood samples of the model prisoners, as per their plan. She explains that they used the blood samples as bait to catch the Big Mouse. Sometime later, Chang-ho is cleared of all charges, and his name is restored since he is not the Big Mouse. His life changes drastically, and he becomes the most competent and virtuous lawyer in the country after capturing the Big Mouse. After becoming a famous lawyer, Chang-ho sets up his law firm and starts planning to fulfill his promise to the Big Mouse. Mi-ho is also determined to handle the case thoroughly because they still need to investigate the prisoner's blood samples that were not given to Ji. Mi-ho and Chang-ho swap the blood samples in the medical room before handing them over to Ji-hoon. Mi-ho tells Chang-ho that Hae-jin is missing, and she hasn't heard anything about her. The next day, Chang-ho goes to the prosecutor's office and tells Jung-rak that he is the lawyer who will defend the Big Mouse in court. Jung-rak is very surprised because he didn't expect the person who caught the Big Mouse to become the lawyer for the legendary criminal. Knowing that Do-ha is watching them, Chang-ho asks to be moved to another room without a camera so no one can watch them. Not long after, Chang-ho asks No Park to sign a representation agreement between client and lawyer and plans to apply for bail. He also asks No Park to prepare some money as collateral. For all his efforts, Chairman Kong gives Ji-hoon a gift in the form of company shares. Ji-hoon feels very grateful, as this is Chairman Kang's way of acknowledging his abilities. However, Ju-hee enters the room and asks Chairman Kong to watch a news conference held by Chang-ho. In the conference, Chang-ho announces that he is the Big Mouse's lawyer because the Big Mouse is not entirely guilty. He promises to ensure that the Big Mouse is punished for his crimes. Chang-ho also reveals that he will uncover the truth behind Professor So's murder case, which does not involve the Big Mouse. He states that the Big Mouse specifically asked him to handle the case. Hearing Chang-ho's words, Chairman Kong immediately tears up the share donation to Ji-hoon, refusing to give it to him. Meanwhile, Mi-ho secretly follows the car transporting the model prisoners near Mount Haryong. Despite her father's warnings about the danger, She continues because she is closer to the location than her father and Soon-tae. At the location, Mi-ho sees Kwang-yeon and the model prisoners entering a tunnel. Inside, they are asked to put on special clothes before starting their work. Mi-ho gets out of the car and calls her father, asking him to come quickly. Suddenly, there is an explosion in the tunnel. Realizing Kwang-yeon is inside, Mi-ho decides to enter the tunnel to save him. She finds Kwang-yeon, who is about to fall into a big hole. Despite the overwhelming situation and a leaking drain pipe spraying water, Mi-ho doesn't give up and tries to get them out. Chairman Kong, who owns the place, hears about the incident. Although there are no fatalities, he ominously says there will be in the future. Chairman Kong asks Do-ha to handle the situation. He explains that a research project called NF9 is being developed by him and his friend, Cho Hae-soo, at their company, NK Chemical. Several years ago, due to problems with the NF9 project, Hae-soo suggested delaying the patent registration for a year to resolve the issues and avoid a potential disaster that could endanger many lives. However, Chairman Kong ignored this advice and continued, seeking big profits despite the risks. Shortly after resigning from the NF9 project, Hae-soo dies when his car catches fire. It is revealed that Do-ha is Hae-soo's grandson, who witnessed his grandfather's death. After his grandfather's death, Do-ha changes his identity so Chairman Kong won't recognize him. In the present, No Park is released on parole with a bail of 3 billion won, paid in cash. After getting out of prison, he takes Chung-ho to his restaurant and asks who requested the Big Mouse to save him. No Park says he will reveal this when the time is right and asks Chung-ho to return to the restaurant tomorrow for an introduction. Though Chung-ho doesn't know who No Park is referring to, he decides not to question it further and leaves. Shortly after Chung-ho leaves, there is a huge explosion at the restaurant, and No Park is pronounced dead. The next day, Do-ha meets Chairman Kong, watching the news about the Big Mouse's death. From their conversation, it is revealed that Do-ha killed the Big Mouse and disguised it as a gas leak to avoid police suspicion. However, Chairman Kong doesn't agree with Do-ha, believing Chung-ho can't do anything after his client dies, including revealing the truth behind Professor So's paper. Despite this, Do-ha plans to kill Chung-ho because he knows too much. That evening, Chung-ho visits No Park's restaurant to investigate whether the Big Mouse's death was an accident or murder. While searching for clues, he is suddenly attacked by a mysterious man hired by Do-ha. Chung-ho is desperate, but another man comes to his aid. The man turns out to be one of Jerry's henchmen. Soon after, Jerry appears and says the attacker was sent by Do-ha. Chung-ho realizes that Jerry, a member of the Big Mouse's organization, came to help him. Jerry then tells Chung-ho that Mi-ho and his father-in-law have been taken to the Charles Hotel, run by the Big Mouse organization, to protect them from Do-ha and his gang, who want to kill Chung-ho and his family. Chung-ho asks if Jerry requested the Big Mouse to save him. Jerry explains that he just joined the organization and isn't high-ranking enough to make such a request. He says the person who made the request must be in the top 3 below the Big Mouse. Jerry invites Chung-ho to attend the Big Mouse's funeral at a church, where he will get answers to all his questions. At first, the Big Mouse helped them solve their problems behind the scenes. After that, they also cooperated with the Big Mouse, which benefited both parties. Chung-ho then sees Yoon-gab, who also attends the funeral. Jerry explains that Yoon-gab has been acquitted of all charges because the victims refused to testify, indicating that the Big Mouse had silenced them. Chung-ho asks if Yoon-gab is number 2, and Jerry confirms that Yoon-gab is one of the top 3 in their organization. As Chung-ho approaches the Big Mouse's coffin, the lights go out, and a projector screen shows a video of No Park before he died. In the video, No Park says he will stop using violence to run the organization because the world now knows about the Big Mouse. No Park explains that he needs someone to lead the organization in a new way and decides to give all his authority as number 1 to Chung-ho, saying Chung-ho is smart and brave. No Park announces that Park Chung-ho is the Big Mouse and will be their new leader. He asks them to trust Chung-ho and follow his orders, as it is his last wish. After watching the video, Yoon-gab accuses Chung-ho of faking the video to take over the organization. Chung-ho denies the accusations, saying he doesn't want to be the leader of the Big Mouse. Soon-tae arrives and admits to everyone that he recorded the video. Chung-ho is shocked to learn that his best friend is number 2 in the Big Mouse organization. Because of Soon-tae's higher rank, Yoon-gab stays silent and doesn't oppose him. Soon-tae then tells everyone that No Park's video contains the Big Mouse's final orders. He invites anyone who disagrees to stand up. No one stands, showing they all accept the Big Mouse's last commands. Afterward, Yoon-gab tells Soon-tae he will follow the Big Mouse's orders, though he looks annoyed. After Yoon-gab leaves, Soon-tae asks Chang-ho to decide whether to accept the offer to become the Big Mouse. Chang-ho remains silent, still in shock from the announcement. When everyone leaves, Chang-ho asks Soon-tae why he did all this. Soon-tae apologizes, saying he couldn't let his best friend die. He was the one who begged the Big Mouse to save Chang-ho, and it was all because of Do-ha who dragged Chang-ho into trouble. Chang-ho tells Soon-tae he doesn't want to be the Big Mouse because he has a family to protect. Soon-tae points out that the organization's core members don't fully trust him as their new leader, and that he will be in greater danger if they rebel. Before leaving, Soon-tae gives Chang-ho time to think about his decision and tells him he must announce his decision the next day. Chang-ho asks Soon-tae to keep this secret from Mi-ho. Later, Chang-ho meets Mi-ho and her father at the Charles Hotel and tells them that the Big Mouse's men will protect them because he must fulfill his promise to the Big Mouse to uncover the truth behind Professor So's paper. Gi-kwang disagrees, saying the Big Mouse's organization is a crime syndicate. However, Mi-ho is determined to solve the case, furious at those who made the prisoners sick, and wants to reveal everything. The next day, Soon-tae asks Chang-ho about his decision. For his family's safety and to honor his promise to No Park, Chang-ho decides to become the Big Mouse. He then asks Soon-tae what really happened to No Park's daughter. Soon-tae explains that No Park's daughter, Soo-jin, was a reporter covering the NR forum chaired by Kang Sung-ga. One day, she disappeared, and her skeleton was found 3 years later. Alongside Soo-jin's skeleton, the police found her notebook mentioning Professor So and a paper. Chang-ho then asks about the 100 billion won that Ji-hoon is looking for. Soon-tae says the Big Mouse ordered Peter Hong to infiltrate the NR forum to find his daughter, but Peter stole the money instead. When they found him, Peter turned himself in to the police, forcing them to silence him on the Big Mouse's orders. Although they found Peter, they didn't find the 100 billion, which was stolen by Do-ha. Soon-tae also reveals that Yoon-gab has tapped Ji-hoon's cell phone, so they know everything Chang-ho said while he was locked up in the mental hospital. After agreeing to become the Big Mouse, Chang-ho asks Soon-tae how to lead the organization. Soon-tae says Chang-ho needs to give him orders, and he will take care of everything. Their first step is to investigate Chairman Kang and the members of the NR Forum. With the help of Mi-ho, her father, and Jerry, they start investigating the NR Forum in detail. The NR Forum has 21 members, including Jung-rak, who just joined, and is chaired by Kang Sung-ga. Besides being the founder and leader of the forum, Chairman Kang owns the company NK Chemical and was formerly a major general in the military. After retiring, he became very successful and wealthy by doing business in various fields. He is called the President for life because he helped Gutchen grow very quickly. After Jerry explains about Chairman Kang and the NR Forum, Mi-ho talks about the increasing number of blood cancer patients in Gutchen. She suspects that Chairman Kang and the NR Forum are behind it, as they have many companies with dangerous chemical waste. Mi-ho then asks her father about the investigation into the tunnel explosion. Gi-kwang explains that he investigated the leaky drain pipe, which turned out to be from a nearby fish farm. Mi-ho is relieved that it wasn't from a chemical factory since she had been hit by the water jet from the pipe before. Meanwhile, Ju-hee, having dinner with Chairman Kang at a restaurant, tells him about secret documents regarding chemical waste disposal from NK Chemical. Ju-hee asks Chairman Kang to close the company because it endangers people's safety and his future. He refuses and says he will continue running the company, even if it means harming many people due to the chemical waste. After Chairman Kang leaves the restaurant, Do-ha reveals to Ju-hee that he ordered Chae-bong and others to kill Professor So on Chairman Kang's orders. Ju-hee is shocked to learn that her husband was involved in the murder. That same night, Ju-hee goes to Gutchen University and instructs Mi-young and the chief security guard to hire trusted people to destroy the underground laboratory holding all the research conducted by NK Chemical. After confirming that the workers have destroyed everything in the secret lab, Ju-hee rushes to meet Chairman Kang. He is furious that she acted against his wishes. Ju-hee explains to Chairman Kang that she wants to set up a new laboratory to avoid police suspicion, as people already know about Professor So's papers related to the secret lab. She needs a lot of money to build a new lab, and asks Chairman Kang for the shares he was going to give to Ji-hoon. Without hesitation, he gives the shares to her. Later, Do-ha, who often swims during his busy schedule, is shocked when two men attack him in the shower room. Even though one of the men stabs his arm with a knife, Do-ha fights back and defeats both attackers. In another place, Chun-sik, who just got out of prison, is met by Chong-ho. Chong-ho gives Chun-sik a new restaurant with all the equipment as a gift for his freedom. Although Chun-sik feels the gift is too much, Chong-ho is glad to give it. He also promises to help Chun-sik start fresh after leaving prison. Shortly after, Jerry tells Chong-ho that Do-ha was attacked by two unknown men, and Yoon-gab is behind the attack. Later, Soon-tae informs Chong-ho that Yoon-gab recently bought a junkyard, and Suri's gang, which controls that area, now works for him. He notes that some people in the organization still don't accept Chong-ho, including Yoon-gab. After that, Soon-tae and Jerry confront Yoon-gab, insisting their leader didn't order the attack on Do-ha. Yoon-gab explains that he wants revenge on the person who killed their former boss and insults Chong-ho, calling him weak and unfit to lead the Big Mouse organization. His words make Soon-tae so angry that he knocks Yoon-gab unconscious. Feeling that Yoon-gab has insulted the Big Mouse, Soon-tae ties him up and puts him in a car filled with gasoline, planning to burn him alive to prevent anyone from disrespecting Chong-ho. But just before setting the car on fire, Chong-ho calls, asking Soon-tae to bring Yoon-gab to him. Chong-ho warns that he will kill Yoon-gab if Do-ha dies because of his actions. Chong-ho's revenge is more severe than Yoon-gab thinks. He plans to expose all their crimes and completely destroy them. He also states that he was never interested in being the Big Mouse and will only stay until this issue is resolved, then he will leave. Meanwhile, Miho, her father, and Jerry read an old article about Cho Hae-soo, who ran a lab at NK Chemical and died by suicide years ago. They investigate Hae-soo's family to find clues about his suspicious death. Since Hae-soo's only relative is now in a nursing home, Miho goes there to ask questions. She meets an old man named Mr. Choi, who shows her a photo and mentions his grandson drowned in the river. Miho is surprised when he says his grandson's name is Do-ha. Miho recalls Do-ha's earlier words about his father being jailed for improperly disposing of chemical waste and later dying by suicide in prison. She then remembers Jerry's information that Hae-soo had a son imprisoned for the same reason, who also died by suicide in prison. Meanwhile, Chong-ho gets an idea after seeing Do-ha's press conference where he says he won't run for mayor of Gutchen again. Chong-ho asks Soon-tae to make their press conference as big as possible and invites Ji-hoon to attend. At the press conference, Chong-ho announces he will run for mayor of Gutchen as an independent candidate. He tells all the reporters that Do-ha has a secret relationship with the most corrupt organization in Gutchen and promises to reveal their crimes. After the press conference, Chong-ho asks Ji-hoon to support him as a candidate for mayor of Gutchen. In return, he will give Ji-hoon the same power as Chairman Kong. He also asks Ji-hoon to arrange a meeting with Chairman Kong. Ji-hoon seems interested in Chong-ho's offer and invites him to meet Chairman Kong at his house, where Do-ha is also present. Seeing Chong-ho arrive, Do-ha looks worried and asks Chairman Kong to send him away. Luckily, Chairman Kong allows Chong-ho to come in. Chong-ho meets Chairman Kong and introduces himself. He tells Chairman Kong that he has been threatened by the Big Mouse, and that the Big Mouse organization now has a new, stronger, and more ruthless leader than No Park. Chong-ho also says that his family was taken hostage by the Big Mouse's men, forcing him to avenge No Park's death. He explains why the Big Mouse is obsessed with Professor So's paper and about NK Chemical's waste causing prisoners to get blood cancer. Chairman Kong asks why Chong-ho came to see him. Chong-ho firmly asks for Chairman Kang's help to become mayor of Gutchen. If Chairman Kong agrees, Chong-ho promises to destroy the Big Mouse organization. Chairman Kong rejects Chong-ho's request, as it is the first time they have met. However, Chong-ho has planned well and gives Chairman Kong information about the core members of the Big Mouse. When Chairman Kong asks about the Big Mouse's identity, Chong-ho says the core members are keeping it a secret and he hasn't found out yet. Although Chong-ho will have to stay undercover, Chairman Kong finally agrees to take the risk and consider Chong-ho's request. After this, Chairman Kong invites Chong-ho and Miho to his birthday party. When Do-ha hears this, he becomes angry because Chong-ho has gotten close to Chairman Kong. Chong-ho then tells Ji-hoon that the Big Mouse never took the 100 billion won and tells Ji-hoon to find it himself. Meanwhile, Miho visits Kwang-yeon in prison. He tells her that he has leukemia and knows he will die soon. She asks about the work he and other good inmates usually do. Suddenly, Kwang Yun begs Mi-ho not to get involved because it will put her in danger. To honor his wish, she visits his siblings to ask about their mother and finds out that Kwang Yun's mother has died. After meeting Chairman Kong at his house, Chung-ho rushes off with Soon-tae and Jerry. On the way, they realize someone is following their car. Chung-ho ignores the person, thinking he is a spy from Do-ha and his gang. Chung-ho meets Yoon-gab at Chun-sik's restaurant for a serious talk. The person following him, Do-ha's assistant, reports to Do-ha about the meeting. After Yoon-gab leaves the restaurant, Do-ha calls him for a meeting. At first, Yoon-gab refuses, but after Do-ha mentions Chung-ho, he agrees. When they meet, Do-ha asks Yoon-gab about the recent attack on him. Do-ha tells Yoon-gab that Chung-ho met with Chairman Kong and gave him a list of the organization's key members. Yoon-gab's reaction shows that the list is real. Do-ha asks if Chung-ho is the new Big Mouse, but Yoon-gab doesn't answer because keeping the Big Mouse's identity secret is a strict rule. Do-ha then proposes they work together to get rid of Chung-ho, and Yoon-gab seems to agree. Elsewhere, Mi-ho visits Mr. Choi at the nursing home again and asks about his grandson who passed away. Mr. Choi points to a boy in a photo and says the boy next to him is Cho Sung-hyun, Cho Hae-soo's grandson. Mi-ho tells Chung-ho, who thinks Do-ha changed his identity to take revenge on Chairman Kong, who may have killed his grandfather. The next day, Chung-ho tells Yoon-gab that Do-ha is really Cho Sung-hyun and wants revenge on Chairman Kong. He asks Yoon-gab to quietly move Mr. Choi out of the nursing home. Meanwhile, Chairman Kong is preparing a will. His assistant asks if he will leave his wealth to his son, who is overseas. Chairman Kong says no, calling his son a psychopath and serial killer. Jerry, who doesn't fully trust Yoon-gab and fears he might betray Chung-ho, secretly follows Yoon-gab and his men who are moving Mr. Choi. While watching them from a distance, one of Yoon-gab's men knocks Jerry out and puts him in the car's trunk. Soon after, Yoon-gab, already at the meeting place, calls Chung-ho to tell him where he is. Chung-ho has something important to do, so he asks Mi-ho to go to Chairman Kang's birthday party first, while he will meet Yoon-gab and join her later. That evening, Mi-ho arrives alone at Chairman Kang's birthday party and becomes the center of attention. Ji-hoon greets her warmly, and Chairman Kong is also happy to see her there. At the same time, Do-ha gets a call from Yoon-gab saying that Chung-ho has fallen into their trap. Do-ha quickly leaves, telling Mi-ho he has something important to handle, but he actually goes to a room in the building to watch Yoon-gab kill Chung-ho. Meanwhile, Jerry wakes up and manages to get out of the car's trunk. Realizing that Chung-ho is in danger, he quickly informs Soon-tae and tells him that Yoon-gab has betrayed them. Soon-tae is shocked and orders his men to save Chung-ho, who is being held captive by Yoon-gab. Chung-ho tries to convince Yoon-gab that Do-ha is the one who killed No Park, but Yoon-gab doesn't care and points a gun at him. During a video call with Do-ha, Yoon-gab shoots Chung-ho. Do-ha, watching this, feels very satisfied as he sees his biggest enemy eliminated. Jerry hears the gunshots and rushes into the building, only to find that Yoon-gab has killed Chung-ho. Knowing Do-ha is behind this, Jerry calls Mi-ho and tells her that Chung-ho has been killed by Yoon-gab on Do-ha's order. Mi-ho is shocked and confronts Do-ha as he is about to get into his car. With tears in her eyes, she angrily confronts him, but he just walks away. Seeing Mi-ho faint, Ji-hoon quickly goes to help her. Meanwhile, Do-ha goes to Yoon-gab and asks where Chung-ho's body is. Yoon-gab says he burned the body. Yoon-gab comments on Do-ha's patience for holding grudges for so long. He says that if he were in Do-ha's position, he would have killed Chairman Kong a long time ago. Hearing this, Do-ha glares at Yoon-gab, especially annoyed when Yoon-gab calls him Cho Sung-hyun. Surprisingly, the conversation between Yoon-gab and Do-ha is recorded and seen by Chairman Kong, all planned by Chung-ho, who is still alive. Yoon-gab never betrayed Chung-ho. They worked together to trap Do-ha. While Chung-ho rushes to the hospital to see Mi-ho, who is being treated there, Chairman Kong is shocked by Do-ha's appearance, who has conspired with his assistant. Do-ha injects poison into Chairman Kang's foreline, causing a heart attack and killing him. With the help of Dae-hwan, Chairman Kang's assistant who betrayed him, Do-ha gets hold of Chairman Kang's will. The next day, Chung-ho and his friends are shocked to learn that Chairman Kong has died. At the funeral, Do-ha pretends to be sad and devastated by Chairman Kang's death and argues with Ji-hoon until they are surprised by Chung-ho and his men arriving. Do-ha is very surprised that Chung-ho is still alive. Chung-ho approaches Do-ha and calls him Cho Sung-hyun, saying he knows Do-ha killed Chairman Kong and vows to expose all his crimes. Elsewhere, Mi-ho is brushing her teeth and is shocked to see her gums bleeding. She remembers Kwang Yun's words about the symptoms of blood cancer, realizing she might have the same disease. After the funeral, Chung-ho tells Ji-hoon that Chairman Kong didn't die of a heart attack. Ji-hoon doesn't believe him because there's no proof that Chairman Kong was murdered. Ji-hoon, thinking he will inherit a lot from Chairman Kong, becomes arrogant and doesn't care about Chung-ho. Fed up with Ji-hoon's attitude, Chung-ho warns him not to ask for help when the will is read, then leaves with his men. Ji-hoon ignores this, confident he has inherited a lot. A few days later, Ji-hoon's wife hires workers to renovate the room where Chairman Kang's will is read. The workers are actually Chung-ho's men, installing cameras to monitor the will reading. Dae-hwan and a lawyer enter the room, where Dae-hwan reveals that Chairman Kong changed his will a week before his death. They state that Chairman Kong left half of all his shares to Ju-hee and the other half to Do-ha. Hearing this, the other NR Forum members are shocked and angry, accusing Do-ha of changing Chairman Kang's will. Annoyed, Ji-hoon calls Chung-ho for help. When Chung-ho doesn't answer, Ji-hoon goes to the Charles Hotel to beg for his help to get back Chairman Kang's inheritance that Do-ha took. At first, Chung-ho refuses, tired of Ji-hoon's behavior. But after Ji-hoon promises to do whatever he asks, Chung-ho agrees to help. Chung-ho tells Ji-hoon about Do-ha's real identity, saying his real name is Cho Sung-hyun. Chairman Kong knew this and wanted to reveal it, but Do-ha killed him first. Learning this, Ji-hoon is furious. He plans to expose the other NR Forum members so that Do-ha doesn't take control. Ji-hoon also promises to support Chung-ho fully as mayor of Gutcheon to defeat Do-ha. Elsewhere, Do-ha tells his wife he will run for mayor of Gutcheon again. Even though Ju-hee knows he is doing this because of Chung-ho, she still supports his decision. In the following days, Do-ha announces to the media that he will run for mayor of Gutcheon. Candidates start campaigning to gain public support, including Chung-ho, who is running for the first time. Meanwhile, Mi-ho secretly goes to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor tells her she has stage 4 lymphoma and needs chemotherapy. Shocked and devastated, Mi-ho decides to keep her condition a secret from her husband so as not to burden him while he fights for justice. One evening, Mi-ho takes Chung-ho to the beach and asks if he is the Big Mouse. He admits he is now the Big Mouse. Surprisingly, Mi-ho isn't upset and asks him to be a good and just the Big Mouse. The next day, Jung-rak tells Ji-hoon that the other NR Forum members have sided with Do-ha. Angry, Ji-hoon rushes to a meeting they are holding without him and is furious they prefer Do-ha, even after learning his true identity. At the same time, Ju-hee contacts a top executive at Gukdong Daily to remove Ji-hoon from his position as company president. She can do this because she is now the largest shareholder after inheriting shares from Chairman Kong. She knows her husband is Cho Sung-hyun, Cho Hae-soo's grandson, and she doesn't mind. Before leaving the room, Ji-hoon promises to expose all of Do-ha's crimes and insults everyone there, calling them losers. Now working with Chung-ho, Ji-hoon gives him a flash drive with evidence to send Do-ha to prison. Soon after, Chung-ho asks Ji-hoon about Chairman Kang's family. Ji-hoon explains that Chairman Kong has a son living in the United States. Chairman Kong cut ties with his son because he is a psychopath and a serial killer. Ji-hoon then tells Jung-rak to find Chairman Kang's son in the United States, mentioning he is a serial killer. However, Chairman Kong had someone else, Kwang Yun, serve his son's prison sentence. Kwang Yun agreed to go to prison to take the blame for someone else because he needed money for his mother's cancer treatment. At the same time, Mi-ho learns that Kwang Yun is in critical condition and may not live long. She rushes to the hospital to see him. In his last moments, he asks about his mother. Mi-ho lies, saying his mother is doing well after treatment, to keep him from worrying. Relieved, Kwang Yun dies peacefully. After his death, Kwang Yun's sister tells Mi-ho that he was not a serial killer but someone who took the blame for others because of Chairman Kong. Angry, Mi-ho confronts Ju-hee, but Ju-hee denies involvement and says Mi-ho has no proof that Chairman Kong or the NR Forum was involved. Elsewhere, Chaibong tells Do-ha about a cryptocurrency fraud case that Chung-ho worked on before going to prison. Chung-ho represented the victims but lost the trial. However, the scammer was eventually caught. Hearing this, Do-ha decides to bribe Su-il, the prosecutor on the case, and invites him to help eliminate Chung-ho as a mayoral candidate. Su-il falsely accuses Chung-ho of receiving 5 billion won from the scammer, causing public uproar and doubt about Chang-ho's candidacy for mayor of Gucheon. Do-ha also bribes a TV station to corner Chang-ho during a debate between mayoral candidates. After learning of Do-ha's actions, Soon-tae and others suggest Chang-ho skip the debate. But Chang-ho insists on facing everything and decides to attend the debate. As Chang-ho gets ready to go to the television station, Mi-ho asks Jerry to take him to the fish farm near the tunnel where Kwang-yun and the prisoners were supposed to work before the explosion. Mi-ho had asked Jerry to investigate the fish farm. Jerry tells her the place is suspicious because it's heavily guarded. The farm owner is Mr. Ko, who used to be head of security at NK Chemical. Mi-ho asks Chun-sik and his men to help her at the fish farm, saying they found something important there. When they arrive, Chun-sik and his men beat up the guards. One guard hides and tells Chaibong they are being attacked by the Big Mouse's men. They defeat the guards and take Mr. Ko to Mi-ho, who gives him a water bottle. Mr. Ko drinks the water to calm down. Mi-ho asks about the fish farm's connection with NK Chemical, but he denies any link. Mi-ho then tells him the water he drank is from the fish farm. He panics and asks for an ambulance, making her more sure the farm is hiding dangerous chemical waste from NK Chemical. Mi-ho then reveals the water was actually from her home. She warns Mr. Ko she will make him drink the fish farm water if he keeps denying involvement with NK Chemical. Meanwhile, Chang-ho questions Do-ha about the NR Forum, where Do-ha holds an important position. As he tries to show Do-ha a document to expose him, the moderator cuts him off, saying his time is up. This happens repeatedly, and Chang-ho realizes the TV station supports Do-ha. Do-ha then questions him about the cryptocurrency fraud case, and Chang-ho denies taking any bribes, even saying he will quit the mayoral race if proven guilty. Chang-ho retaliates by bringing up the Special Substance Management Bill, which could hurt NK Chemical. He points out that the number of cancer patients in Gucheon is 20% higher than in other cities and asks Do-ha about NK Chemical's NF9 substance, which emits high radiation during purification. Do-ha can't answer and accuses Chang-ho of making false claims. Chang-ho then shows an old article about NF9, developed by Cho Hae-soo, Do-ha's grandfather. In the article, Hae-soo claims that NF9 and its radiation during purification can endanger many people. Since this is true, Do-ha cannot argue or escape Chang-ho's question. Meanwhile, Mi-ho asks Mr. Ko, who admits that the fish farm is a cover for NK Chemical to dump wastewater into the sea. She records his confession as evidence to put Do-ha and his gang in prison. Mi-ho then tells Chun-sik and his men to gather more evidence from the farm, planning to reveal everything during the live mayoral debate. Unfortunately, as they are about to leave, Do-ha's men arrive, sent by his assistant. Chun-sik tells Mi-ho and Jerry to leave while he and his men deal with the attackers. Chaibong informs Do-gun that Mi-ho and Jerry are heading to the TV station. Do-gun asks his police contacts to stop Mi-ho and Jerry, but Yoon-gab acts faster, sending the Big Mouse's police allies to escort them safely to the TV station. At the same time, Chang-ho is worried because the TV station has brought in the cryptocurrency fraudster to the debate. The fraudster claims to have evidence of Chang-ho taking bribes, but he refuses to show it, and the audience believes him. Mi-ho arrives at the station and joins the debate. She says she is there not as Chang-ho's wife, but as a victim of NK Chemical's radiation leak. She reveals she has stage 4 lymphoma due to high radiation exposure. Everyone is shocked by Mi-ho's statement. With tears in her eyes, Mi-ho stays strong and explains NK Chemical's violations in handling hazardous waste. She shows the video of Mr. Ko exposing NK Chemical's dumping of chemical waste into the sea through the fish farm. Mi-ho explains that tens of thousands have died or developed cancer because of the chemical waste, and that's why Do-ha wants to revoke the Special Substance Management Bill. After the debate, Chang-ho hugs Mi-ho and apologizes for not being able to make her happy. Gi-kwang is devastated to learn his beloved daughter has stage 4 cancer and may not live long. The next day, people protest in front of the prosecutor's office, demanding Do-ha step down as a mayoral candidate and for NK Chemical to be closed. However, Do-ha seems unfazed, acting confidently as if he knows Chang-ho cannot defeat him. Soon after, Chang-ho goes to Ju-hee and tells her that Ji-hoon will perform an autopsy on Chairman Kang's body to prove that Do-ha killed him. He says this so Ju-hee can confirm for herself that her husband killed Chairman Kang. Ju-hee confirms the truth by talking with her husband's assistant. Despite being arrested and questioned for 72 hours, the prosecution cannot arrest Choi Do-ha. The court delays Do-ha's investigation because of the upcoming general election and decides to hold the trial after the mayoral election. Even though Chung-ho and his team worked hard during the campaign, Chung-ho loses to Do-ha in the election for mayor of Gutcheon. Mi-ho doesn't want Chung-ho and the others to be sad about losing, so she invites them to a meal together. Soon after, Mi-ho receives a package from Ju-hee containing her husband's disposable cell phone, which has important evidence of Do-ha's crimes. Chung-ho then calls Ju-hee and asks her to testify at her husband's trial. After thinking for a moment, she agrees. The next day in court, Do-ha says the cell phone the prosecutor has isn't his. He knew Ju-hee took the phone the night before through a hidden camera and planned for her betrayal. He also has his men put Ju-hee in a mental hospital to stop her from testifying. Do-ha is acquitted of all charges due to lack of evidence. After the trial, Mi-ho collapses. Chung-ho rushes her to the hospital. When she wakes up, Mi-ho tells Chung-ho she's tired and wants to sleep forever. She then dies, with Chung-ho by her side. He is devastated but tries to stay strong. One day, Chung-ho meets Do-ha, who has just finished swimming. Chung-ho tells him he bought the building. Do-ha looks down on him, even knowing Chung-ho is the big mouse. Do-ha thinks Chung-ho can never beat him, but Chung-ho has replaced the pool water with chemical wastewater to kill Do-ha. Soon after, Do-ha vomits blood and dies from the chemical wastewater, just as he had used it to kill others. After Do-ha's death, Chung-ho finds the billions of won in Professor So's paper that Do-ha had hidden. Ji-hoon's wife saves Ju-hee from the mental hospital, and she testifies to reveal all her husband's crimes. Ji-hoon becomes the president of Chairman Kang's largest company and the new NR Forum chairman. Yoon-gab returns as the prison warden to punish Chaebong, Do-gun, and Jae-ho for their crimes. Chung-ho donates large sums to orphanages and nursing homes and decides to be a good and virtuous the big mouse to honor his late wife's last wish. The series ends. So the moral of the story is don't drink randomized coffee while on a mission to save your marriage and career, or you might end up as a legendary criminal mastermind in a twisted game of survival.